Hey guys, welcome to Beklaedt's YouTube channel. If you are new to this channel, then please hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on new video guides, tips and tricks and a lot more. My name is Iben, and in this video I'll show you how I sew the blouse Ahorn. This blouse is a simple wrap blouse in knitted fabric. The blouse has two front pieces, a back piece, two long sleeves and long waist ties. With this sewing pattern, you'll also be able to make the dress Ahorn. If you have limited sewing experience, I recommend to make the blouse first and then the dress second. You can buy the pattern for Ahorn on my website, Beklaedt.com. We need suitable fabric for the blouse. I use an olive green rib knitted jersey in viscose. The fabric is a remnant I got for only 10 Danish crowns at a fabric store that had to close. The fabric has nice stretch and drape, which makes it ideal for this style. We also need matching thread. And then I recommend to sew with jersey needles. This sewing pattern is developed for knitted fabric that has a stretch percentage of 35 to 50%. If you don't know the stretch of your fabric, it's easy to measure. Cut a piece of fabric along the width of the fabric that is about 20 centimeters long and 4 centimeters wide. Place the fabric next to a ruler and stretch it until you feel the resistance. As shown here, I can stretch the fabric until it reaches about 29 centimeters. To calculate the stretch, I divide 9 with 20, which is 0.45, which means the stretch percentage of the fabric is 45%. More stretch means more flexibility and ease. First step in the sewing guide is to cut the fabric according to the cutting guide. When cutting the waist ties, you can refer to the table in the written guide that shows the suggested length in each size. But it's up to you, and you can make the ties in the exact length you prefer. But no matter the length, it's important to know that the ties should be cut so they are 10 centimeters wide. Remember to also cut the narrow 4 cm wide ribbons, which we will use to bind off the neckline. Again, you can find the exact length of binding needed in your size in the written guide. Now it's time to stitch the two front pieces to the back piece along the shoulder seam. Place the back piece flat on the table so the right side is facing up. Place the front pieces on top, right sides together, and pin the pieces together by the shoulder seams. When working with knitted fabric, it's necessary to enforce the shoulder seam. The way I typically do it is by cutting a narrow piece of fabric from a scrap, which I then place next to the back piece. This narrow piece of fabric should be stretched so it is about 2/3 of the shoulder seam, while it's being pinned to the shoulder seam. You can also use a piece of clear elastic tape that is sewn directly into the shoulder seam instead. Stitch the shoulder seam using a 1 cm seam allowance. I finish by overlocking the seam allowance, but if you don't have an overlocker, you can also use a zigzag stitch instead. From the right side, top stitch along the shoulder seam. Press the seam allowance from the shoulder seam towards the front piece and stitch a couple of millimeters from the shoulder seam down the front piece. Finish by overlocking all 4 side seams of the blouse. Because we're making a wrap blouse, it's necessary to make a hole along the right side seam, which the waist tie can pass through. Place the blouse flat on the table so the right side is facing up. Find the paper pattern and transfer the position of the waistline onto the right side seam. Then measure 4 cm upwards from this point and place another pin. Turn the blouse around so the right side is facing inwards and pin the right side seam together, but please remember to leave the hole. Pin the whole left side seam. Stitch the 2 side seams, but remember to leave the hole on the right side seam. Press the side seams open with your iron. From the right side, stitch around the hole at the right side seam about 7 mm from the edge. Find the 2 sleeves. The sleeve cap is identical on either side of the shoulder notch, which means you can use both sleeves in both armholes. Fold the sleeve in half, right sides together, and pin the side seam. Place a pin to mark the shoulder notch, which is exactly at the center of the sleeve cap. Stitch the side seams on both sleeves. Finish by overlocking the side seams. I also overlock around the hemline by the bottom of the sleeve. Find one sleeve and place it next to one of the armholes. Match the shoulder notch with the shoulder seam and pull the sleeve in under the blouse so the sleeve is laying right sides together with the armhole. Pin the sleeve in place all around the armhole and remember to correctly match the 2 side seams with each other. Stitch the sleeve to the armhole. Finish by overlocking the seam allowance around the armhole. Do the same for the other side. Find the waist ties, which are the two pieces of fabric that are 10 cm wide and as long as the suggested length in the written guide, or the length that you prefer. Fold the pieces in half lengthwise, right sides together, and place pins. At one of the ends, you need to cut into the fabric at a 45-degree angle. It doesn't matter from which side you cut. Stitch the tie using a 1 cm seam allowance. Remember to let the uncut short end of the tie stay open. It's a good idea to slightly stretch the tie while you feed it through the sewing machine. Trim the seam allowance around the corners of the tie. Then turn it around so the right side is facing up. Press the waist tie with your iron. Do the same for the other tie. Place the tie on top of each front piece along the short vertical edge, right sides together. The tie should lay 1 cm below the neckline. The raw edge of the tie should be aligned with the vertical edge of the front piece. Place pins and stitch each tie to each front piece about 5 mm from the edge. Find the narrow 4 cm wide ribbons, which will be used to bind off the neckline and the raw edges of the blouse. In the written guide, you'll find a table with the exact lengths of binding needed in each size. Place the neckline binding flat on the table so the right side is facing up. Place one of the short bindings on top, right sides together, and pin the pieces together along one of the short edges. Using tailor's chalk, draw a wide angle down towards the center of the binding. This angle should be about 130 degrees wide. Find the other short binding and place it on top of the neckline binding, right sides together, and pin the pieces together by the other short edge. Draw the same wide angle onto the fabric. Stitch along the two angles and trim away the seam allowance. Then fold the binding in half lengthwise, wrong sides together. Find the blouse and place the binding on top of the neckline, right sides together, so the raw edge of the binding is aligned with the neckline. Find center back on the neckline binding by folding it in half and match it to the center back on the blouse. Then find one angle on the binding, which should be matched to one of the corners on the front bodice. Please note that the neckline binding is shorter than the neckline. This means you should stretch the binding when you pin it to the neckline. It's important to distribute the difference in length evenly across the whole neckline. When you have finished pinning the binding to the neckline, you can continue down the opening of the blouse. You shouldn't stretch the binding on the blouse. When you reach the bottom of each blouse, you need to fold the bottom hemline of the blouse 2 cm towards the waistline, so the right side of the hemline is facing the right side of the blouse. Make sure the binding has the same length as the blouse, then pin the binding to the hemline. As you can see, I didn't pre-cut my binding in the correct length, but if you have cut your binding according to the table in the cutting guide, then there's no need to adjust the binding on the go like me. Stitch the binding to the dress all the way around about 7 mm from the edge. Trim away the corners on the front pieces. Then fold the binding around itself on the wrong side of the blouse, so the seam allowance from the binding is hidden under itself. Place lots of pins. It's a good idea to press the binding nice and flat with your iron before sewing it in place. At the same time, I also press the hemline of the blouse 2 cm towards the wrong side and the hemline of the sleeve 1 cm towards the wrong side. From the right side, stitch the binding in place 1 cm from the edge. If you find it very difficult, you can also turn the dress around so the wrong side is facing up, whereby you can see the binding the entire time. Start and finish the seam 2 cm above the hemline of the blouse. Then continue by stitching the hemline of the blouse in place about 2 cm from the edge. Lastly, stitch the hemline on the sleeve about 1 cm from the edge. And that was it. I hope you like your new blouse and will use it a lot. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram @Beklaedt_sewing. Thanks for watching!